Good morning, and happy His Holiness the Dalai Lama's birthday. What a special day today. So we'll sit for a while in silent meditation to settle our mind and body. So before we say the homage to Manjushri, let's take time in cultivating the merit field with Manjushri in the space above us. Seeing him as a personification of the wisdom of all Buddhas put together. Of course, the wisdoms of all the Buddhas are integrated with all the other method aspects of the path as well, all of them having reached full culmination. But for special purpose here, we're emphasizing the wisdom part of it and seeing the Manjushri to be the personification of it, integrated with all the other aspects of the Buddha's qualities, such as infinite love, compassion, bodhicitta, all the perfections. In full consummate blossoming. Be reminded of the role and place of wisdom in our quest for lasting happiness, freedom from the clutches of afflictions and their subtle traces, both for ourselves and others. How crucial it is to develop wisdom in general, more particularly wisdom into the ultimate nature of reality, to the level of seeing it directly, and then not just stopping there, even developing it further to such power that it can address the subtlest of the subtlest afflictions and the traces of them, thus clearing the way to full awakening for the sake of all sentient beings. Think of ourselves being surrounded by fellow sentient beings, all in human forms, yet undergoing their own respective sufferings and predicaments, in samsara in general and in their own respective realms of existence, particularly those belonging to the lower realms. But even in the case of those belonging temporarily in the higher realms, the seemingly respite is just a short-lived one, unless and until one has severed the afflictions approaching it from the depth of their ignorance. These seemingly comforts are just temporary ones, only to lead to more suffering. And in the case of not being able to identify the root of the sufferings, and even if one has identified them, if one fails to integrate them, practice them, internalize them, the prospect of ever getting out of samsara is very bleak, almost equal to impossible. And in the case of arhats, Bodhisattva, Arya beings, although they have attained freedom from the captivity of the afflictions and the actions induced by them, and thus free from ever driven by afflictions into any samsaric existence. Nonetheless, they still have cognitive obscurations to clear in their way of becoming fully awakened. So think of the array of sentient beings, the range of sentient beings along these lines of limitations, predicaments that befall them, and feel very inspired and encouraged to pursue the path to full awakening for the sake of all sentient beings. With these attitudes in the background, let's say the homage to Manjushri together. Let's sit for a while in this mental mode of bodhicitta, aspiring to attain full awakening for the sake of all sentient beings. Once again, think of our own situation in the hands of afflictions and actions induced by them. Thinking of how unbearable it is, and the prospect of continuing in this is even worse. Generate a deep felt sense that one needs to free oneself from this, one needs to get out of this. then thinking of the fact that all other sentient beings are no different in this condition. How deep down we all are same in wanting happiness and not suffering. Yet this is our shared condition of losing complete control to the afflictions, actions induced by them. The two afflictions all rooted, grounded in ignorance, completely confused, not even that, completely misconstruing the reality. How just the starting point is so skewed. What better prospect can we expect from such a situation? And at the same time, we depend on each other just about for everything. Throughout our existence in samsara, and for much more longer time, so long as we are in samsara, we have no choice but to depend on fellow sentient beings, irrespective of how confused we may be. Within that condition of confusion, we nonetheless have to depend on each other and to extend helping hands, directly or indirectly, to each other, even at the cost of each other's lives. Yet, being steeped in ignorance, none of those helps go very far in really solving the problem. If it all just serves as a temporary comfort, temporary fix, but never fixing the actual problem. If this were to continue, there would be no chance, no time we would ever get out of this mess. Taking full advantage of our special privilege of having had this precious human rebirth facilitated with all the conditions conducive for practicing Dharma, bringing on our interest in Dharma, in our awakening, that yes, something needs to be done. We take this opportunity in expanding our sense of concern, care to all sentient beings. In the midst of that, by the blessing of Manjushri, all the Buddhas, the inspirations, we at least have generated interest in Dharma, have awakened to this fact of our mess, maybe for the first time ever. We cannot let this slip by. Rather, we must feel all determined to make the most of this, so that we would continue to be as privileged in not just practicing the Dharma, but even continuing from where we had left in the previous lives, and eventually growing, progressing along the path to full awakening. On the basis of such a privileged birth as human beings with all these facilities, there is a hope. We actually begin to see the light at the end of the tunnel if we really manage to make the most of this time, however long, short we may have of it. Nonetheless, starting from here and now, if we look inside, make the needed changes within by taking control of our own attitudes, emotions, outlook, and if we persist in it, integrate it in our meditation and other practices, it's but natural for these habits, insights, attitudes to grow further and further. Among all the other aspects of practices that we need to understand, reflect on, integrate within our mind, one of them, rather very crucial one, is wisdom. Both conventional and ultimate wisdom. More particularly the wisdom of understanding the ultimate nature of reality. Of course, grounded on our wisdom of the conventional realities. But ultimately, it is such a wisdom of understanding the ultimate nature of reality that through wisdom developed to the level of full equipoise, direct insight into it, that can start to have the force, power required to make a difference, to chip off our store of afflictions and ignorance. Towards that end, we are going to sit through the session and share the insights that Shantideva brings in this masterpiece, the product of his own several decades, maybe centuries, lifetimes of practice. And that too for the sake of all sentient beings, by attaining full awakening. Okay. Let's see if we can do more than one stanza today. I promise it will not be less than a stanza. Can you hear? Okay, I'll try to speak louder also. Today I have some energy. I was storing it, but I can use it. Yes. Yeah, I can project. Today is definitely His Holiness's birthday. Whoa, light up. Perk up. Feel amazed by this day. His Holiness has come into this world and we are here walking on the globe together with His Holiness. And then get to not just witness, but also partake of his enlightened activities. So once again, rejoicing this day. So to review a little bit, one thing that I'll try to bring in things little by little, but things that I needed to bring in, I should bring it up. I think I may have brought it up last time, something about selflessness of phenomena. So selflessness of phenomena and selflessness of person. It's very crucial here. In the very first stanza, when the author says, the sage taught, now I'm reading my edition, okay? The sage taught all these branches of teachings for the sake of the wisdom, not just a wisdom, the wisdom. Therefore, those who wish to pacify the sufferings of self and others, or rather, therefore, those who wish to pacify both the sufferings should generate the wisdom. So here the wisdom specifically in line with what Shantideva has been working on through these past 8 chapters is the wisdom of understanding, specifically the selflessness of phenomena. Selflessness of person, selflessness of phenomena. In one way, selflessness of phenomena or selflessness of person means the emptiness of phenomena, emptiness of person. But then there is a reason for calling this selflessness of person, selflessness of phenomena, as opposed to selflessness of person, because there is a notion, an understanding of selflessness of person apart from the emptiness of person. So there is a separate notion of selflessness of person, then the emptiness of person. And this notion, this other notion of selflessness of person is something that is shared by all the tenets within Buddhism, all the tenet systems, including Prasangika Madhyamika, except when they mean by the subtle selflessness of person is different than this notion of selflessness of person shared by all the rest of them. And to make a point of this, what you call more subtle selflessness of person, I think we could say they make this additional. They make the case of this additional insight called selflessness of phenomena. Because when we call something the selflessness of phenomena, that would be very unique and uncommon with the rest of the tenets. So when you say the sage taught all these branches of teachings for the sake of the wisdom of understanding. Of course, not just understanding, it has to be developed further, but beginning with the understanding of the selflessness of phenomena. And therefore, those who wish to pacify both the sufferings, the suffering of self and others, should generate the wisdom. So this selflessness of phenomena is something that is necessary, indispensable to be cultivated if one wants to be freed from suffering, which means if one wants to address the ignorance that's at the root of afflictions leading to the contaminated, polluted karma leading to suffering. If one wants to address that ignorance, there is no other way but to understand or start from understanding and developing this wisdom into the selflessness of phenomena. So right there, the author is bringing in this understanding, or this position that even if one is pursuing one's own self-liberation, there's no way one can uh, there's no way one can not understand the wisdom, or not understand the selflessness of phenomena, on top of understanding what they understand as the selflessness of person. So in addition to their notion, the shared notion of selflessness of selflessness of person, this selflessness of phenomena, as understood by the Prasangika Madhyamikas, is essential. So this is saying that even for Shravakas, Pratyeka Buddhas, those pursuing that path, even for them also, getting rid of the ignorance, thereby succeeding in getting rid of the suffering, is only possible by understanding the wisdom, understanding the selflessness of phenomena. And those who are striving to attain full awakening for the sake of all sentient beings, thereby not just being content with eliminating the suffering, eliminating the ignorance, but even further eliminating the subtle traces of ignorance. For them, it goes without saying that they need to understand the selflessness of phenomena. So then when we speak of selflessness of phenomena, then this the notion of selfhood takes a different meaning. Up until now, if we could say up until now, or at least in the shared understanding of the lower tenets, when they speak of selflessness of person, when they speak only of selflessness of person, not selflessness of phenomena, that notion of selfhood that needs to be negated has something necessarily to do with personhood, has something necessarily to do with the notion of personhood. So it is always connected with a person. So that is the notion of how the person exists in relation to its aggregates. And there, when we project this, exactly the notion that this self exists in dependence on the aggregates, yet with a vantage point of being the controller, being in control among the aggregates, to be controlled by it, and seeing the self, though not as permanent or independent or partless, not in that gross picture, but nonetheless seeing that as impermanent, dependent, with parts, but nonetheless enjoying some special status over the aggregates in being the controller, and the aggregates being the controlled, to the extent of almost suggesting that this I can be identified without having to depend on identifying the aggregates. So, cut in short, this notion of self-sufficient, substantial selfhood is what is being attacked, and the lack of which is being spoken of when we speak of the selflessness of person in the as understood by the lower tenets. Of course, that is also shared by the Prasangika Madhyamikas, but they do not say that is the only way, that is the only notion of selflessness of person or selfhood of person. So unlike this notion of selflessness or selfhood or person, which surrounds around the notion of personhood in relation to the aggregates. When we speak of selflessness of phenomena, we are now taking the notion of selfhood a notch up by identifying it, by making it uh, uh, equivalent to a notion of identity, irrespective of whether something is person or not. Everything has an identity. Now, how we see the identity of that thing or person is being then addressed. So this goes a little deeper, and also is more universal. So when we speak of selflessness of phenomena, selflessness of cup, selflessness of, we're not saying that this cup doesn't has a self as in person, but the cup doesn't has an identity as selfhood or an identity, self-identity, or an identity which is inherent in it. It's rather whatever its identity is, it's totally through and through borrowed identity. And on the basis of that borrowed identity, it is capable of doing its unique functions, operations, and thus the dependency. All of those are possible on the basis of this, just thoroughly through and through borrowed identity. And thus not the single thing outside of the person as well as within the person. There's not a single thing, single person, single phenomena that has any inherent, intrinsic, self-enclosed, independent identity of its own. So that lack of a exaggerated identity of a phenomena that notion can also be applied to a person without having to confine it to a sense of personhood, by saying that the person, irrespective of whether we speak of its personhood or not, its very identity is a thoroughly borrowed thing. And thus, the selflessness or the identitylessness of a person goes a little deeper, a step deeper than in the case of the selflessness of notion, selflessness of person shared by the rest of the tenets. So I think I remember very clearly Venerable reminding us, when we speak of these four tenets, they are not to be seen something out there and saying, this is this is they. They do not agree. They do not agree. They agree on this part, but rather one has to kind of look inside and see what part of the tenet position one is sharing. And it's quite interesting to see sometimes that we kind of shift from one position to the other in a day's time. Like take our understanding of emptiness. When we think of emptiness, it seems like, okay, it's tending towards prasankika. But then when we realize that tends to delete things, that tends to take away things from us, then we begin to understand that, yes, that's not going on the right track. I need to back off and then kind of at least affirm the existence of phenomena. But when we affirm the phenomena, we kind of lose hold on them being lacking inherent existence. So that's where we are swinging back and forth between, we might call, prasankika position to that of the rest of the tenet holders. Who knows, depending on how grossly we hold on to their identity to support their functionality, operationality, their existence, we tend to go to the other extreme of projecting some kind of a self-enclosed identity, inherent nature in them. And that's when we fall into any of the tenets, depending on how gross that projection is. It could even fall into the Vaibhashikas or Sautantrikas if we are kind of a little more nuanced in how much we are allowing for to have some kind of identity to support the functionality, then we could be lucky to fall with Chittamatra or the Sautantrika Madhyamika. So it's very important to look at the tenet systems in that respect and work on oneself. Okay, that's said. That should be. That's said. But this wisdom is not that easy to gain, to acquire within us. It has several layers of understanding, several layers of meaning that needs to be tackled, understood, sorted through to arrive at the final understanding in the case of the presented by the Prasangika Madhyamikas. Just to give a little background, these four tenets, they all, at least from the Buddhist perspective, they all have their sources in the Buddha's teachings. The Sautantrika and the Vaibhashika and the Sautantrika, they trace their teachings, their philosophy, their understanding or presentation of the system of the Buddha Dharma to the first turning of the wheel, where Buddha didn't touch on whether things have intrinsic existence or not. He just said there are these four truths. There are these four truths. There is suffering that needs to be identified. There's cause to the suffering in the form of the afflictions. And there is this possibility of severing or eliminating the afflictions and arrive at cessation. And that can happen through the practice of the paths. Now, in terms of whether these paths are truly existent or not, he didn't necessarily explicitly touch on them. So it's like here, these gadgets here, work on these new one gadgets to get to deal with your suffering. And not necessarily warning them that don't grasp at them, just deal with them in the way you do with everything that you do. But except these are new things to kind of focus on and then see whether they make a difference. Then came the second teaching, second turning of the wheel, at least from the Mahayana perspective. When Buddha taught the cycles of perfection of wisdom sutras, where he almost seemed like negating everything that he said in the first teaching. There's no this, no this, no this, no this. Is there anything? No. Even nothing is not there. Right? Everything is negated. So those who were smart and for whom Buddha had kind of really aimed these teachings, they were kind of going, aha, aha, like that. They're kind of nodding. Ah. But there are many who were kind of confused. What's going on here? He seemed to affirm so many things in the first teaching, but now he's negating everything, deleting everything. So as part of this sutra, there was one master, Dadul Namgyal. I don't know, it's Sanskrit name. Someone who knew, who understood the qualms of others who were kind of having trouble. So he volunteered to raise their questions to the Buddha on their behalf. You said this, you said this. Buddhas cannot have contradictions, but there is an apparent contradiction here. What is going on? Then Buddha said, okay, yes. Then he taught the third teaching, where he's, at least in the eyes of those who had difficulty understanding the second one, after having heard the first teaching, those who are having difficulties understanding the second one, and kind of harmonizing the two, for them, the Buddha presented, at least in their eyes, a middle way. Saying, when I say things are, I meant these things. When I say things aren't, I meant these things. So then he kind of sorted them out for them. And thus from them came the position of the Chittamatras. And during the second one came the position of the Madhyamikas. So all of the 4 tenets are accounted for there in the very source of Buddha's teaching. And then it may have gotten expanded and like that. So that's one thing to understand, very important. Another thing is to think that, yes, Buddha had a strategy in presenting this. And thus kind of bank on this and try to kind of find out what's the meaning, what's the benefit, purpose behind presenting this in this way. And then, as I have been mentioning, sharing throughout these years, is that when we look at these 4 tenets, I mean, one could run one particular topic through them and then see it being refined. It's so interesting. Even as simple or as universal as the nature of mind, you can run it through the 4 tenet system. It's almost like we can develop an app and then hold something and then run it through and then see the refinement going. It's like that. Particularly the notion of selflessness or selfhood. If you run through the tenet systems, you will find refinement, and you will see how they are all aimed at refining our understanding so that we could arrive at the prasangika madhyamika level. Where I said last time, the prasangika level, whatever prasangika madhyamika upholds is considered to be true. That's the challenge, to prove to oneself or to question. And then whatever Tantra brings on top of that is in addition, not in contradiction, but in addition to what the prasangikas bring. But then until prasangika, all the rest has faults, including chittamatras, and faults more particularly along the line of what they understand to be the ultimate nature of things. They will all call it, this is ultimate nature, this is ultimate nature. Everyone would have their own take of ultimate nature, but whether they really stand to that level or not is to be tested. They do not. So, and among all these topics that go through this refinement through these, in the hands of these 4 tenet systems, the main thing is the understanding of the reality, understanding of the ultimate nature of reality, which would be the only antidote, only tool to deal with the root of afflictions, to deal with ignorance when it comes to really kind of a one-to-one encounter. It's that understanding of the ultimate nature. And thus, in this chapter, it is among all other positions, it's mainly their take of what is ultimate reality, or their take of completely misconstrued notion of how things exist. That's the main theme, and then related with them, the other topics will be brought up and discussed and then put to test. So here it is the selflessness of phenomena, selflessness of person in its subtle nature. On the basis of the selflessness of person at a grosser level that is understood and shared by the rest of the tenet holders. And there they are not mistaken, but that doesn't go far enough. It only serves as a second. It only serves as a grosser understanding of the selflessness of person. Only able to deal with the afflictions only so far, but not in uprooting it. So in the first stanza, the Buddha or the Shantideva makes the point that pursuing the understanding of the emptiness of phenomena and person, both of them, at this selfless level is must. Because unless and until one gets hold of that, the ignorance cannot be eliminated. And particularly those who are pursuing the Bodhisattva path to awaken to the full state of Buddhahood, not only ignorance, but even the subtle stains of it needs to be eliminated. And for that, no other means but this wisdom of understanding selflessness of phenomena is necessary. So when we say selflessness of phenomena, in the context of selflessness of within this division of selflessness of phenomena and selflessness of person, between the two, they are supposed to cover all of the phenomena. So person, things related to person, or person, I as the basis, or the mind as the basis to establish the selflessness is included within the selflessness of person. All the rest of the phenomena are included in the selflessness of phenomena. So between the two, everything is covered, which is another way of saying that everything whatsoever, without exception, any those belonging to the samsaric realm, or those belonging to the nirvana realm, all of them without exception lacks intrinsic existence, lacks inherent existence in this subtlest form. But it is not that easy to understand, not that easy to even actually identify within ourselves. To see anything wrong with that kind of a notion is one thing. First and foremost, one has to identify that there is such a notion within us. That's another thing. And then once we identify it, to see that there is something wrong with it is another step. And then the third one is that there can be something to be, that there can be something done with them is the third one. And then actually internalizing the practice and actually executing, or actually setting into motion that process of mitigating it is the actual process. So in this regard, to set into motion the process of identifying it, seeing something wrong with it, and then something that needs to be done, and actually getting to do something to actually eliminate it or start the process of eliminating it, is first and foremost the need of understanding, of getting our hold on this understanding of the true truths. And again, true truth is something that is dealt with in all these tenet systems in their own respective ways, pertinent to their level of understanding of how things are, like that. But nonetheless, at the core of this topic lies what their position is with regard to whether things have intrinsic inherent existence or not. That's the very basis for this discussion back and forth and dialogue back and forth. Just to give a slight idea, at the Vaibhashika, although it will come again and again, but to put it within this context may be easier. At the Vaibhashika level, of course, there are so many areas they differ with other tenet systems, but there are as many, or even more that they agree. As I said yesterday, the previous session, it's not that on everything the four tenets differ. There are many that they share, and they serve as the basis for the next understanding or next development. And then whatever they disagree on, those are picked at and refined as we move up the ladder. Many of the points of disagreements are things that they are merely conceptually constructed or philosophical stipulations. Of course, not just for the sake of them, for the purpose of serving some area of the philosophy to kind of maintain a complete overview of how things are and what are the ways to move along the path, etc. But nonetheless, falling within this realm of mere philosophical speculations. And those are being pointed out and then kind of ruled out or negated. But one thing, among many things that they disagree, one is whether or not there is intrinsic existence. So in the case of the Vaibhashika and Swatantrika, they are 100% sure that things have inherent independent existence of their own. They cannot think of any other way. Any other way would amount to denigrating or would amount to eliminating, annihilating the existence of the other phenomena, all the phenomena. So on the Vaibhashika and Swatantrika level, the lowest two, they fully stand for everything that exists to have an inherent existence. In the case of the Vaibhashika, in the case of Vaibhashika and Swatantrika, in the case of these two lower tenets, they even go to the extent of saying that everything has to have some kind of an objective starting point, reference point, building block outside of the mind, for then build bigger blocks or bigger structures on them. They have to be that consciousness. They say at the consciousness at its very, very ultimate level has an indivisible, partless, indivisible consciousness, an event of consciousness. And that serves as the basis by which then longer and longer, temporarily longer and longer instances of consciousness can happen. More and more sophisticated consciousness can happen. But nonetheless, ultimately, there has to be an objectively existing, partless, if you will, consciousness atom to begin with. And so is this case with physical things. They speak of indivisible, partless. In present terms, it could be even subtler than atom. But nonetheless, they say there has to be. To that extent, they go to advocate inherent existence. Now, when it comes to Chittamatra say no, let alone there be any kind of a objectively existing, partless, indivisible building block or reference point to begin with. There's not even external thing, such thing as external thing. Things external to mind, there is no such thing. Everything is mentally projected. Mind does exist, and all the rest are mental projections. Nothing outside of mind exists, let alone anything that has a objective building, objective in this indivisible, partless state of existence. Let alone that there's no such thing as external phenomena, external to the mind. Everything is mental projection. But mind does exist and exists truly, exists inherently. So it goes to another extent. Then comes Madhyamika, but within that, before Prasangika Madhyamika, the Sautantrika Madhyamika comes to the rescue, saying, no, not to that extreme. Let it be brought to the middle here. Let's say, yes, mind do exist, phenomena do exist, external phenomena exist, mind do exist, but not external phenomena to the extent of having a ultimately traceable, objectively existing, partless building block. Not to that extent. Things are dependently related, but nonetheless, they are external things, and mind also. Both of them have some level of dependency on others, yet at the same time they enjoy some level of independence. So it is 50-50. So it can be appealing to people at different steps. The Sautantrika and the Vaibhashika stand is something that just about all of the common people, ordinary people will understand. Yes, there. Somebody did it to me. Yes, the harming person is out there. The harm is out there. All is very concrete. But then there are others who are a little sophisticated and saying no. Particularly things like qualities, values, those are purely mental. And then they extend it by saying, not just values are mental, even what I see of other things are mental. They are private, personal. They would go like that. What I see, even in the case of this pencil or so, the pencil that I see, you don't see. What you see, I don't see. Apart from that, there is no pencil, right? There is pencil if you do not investigate, but the pencil I see, you cannot see. You cannot get into my head and see the pencil I see. And it becomes much more gross, much more evident when we talk of values. This is good, this is bad, or this is totally subjective. Right? So there are certain, foundations for such positions to be held. It's not just out of a blue they hold this position and it kind of makes case for it, but there is some value, but they need to be refined and understood and brought more in sync, closer and closer to the reality. So in the case of the Sautantrika Madhyamika, they say it's half and half. Half and half is quite appealing also. When you say somebody is a teacher, just we cannot appoint anyone to be teacher and they become teacher. No, they have to have some quality. But again, even if people have qualities, they do not necessarily get to be chosen as teachers. So many other considerations go into the process, and some get picked up, others don't, and they end up not being teacher. The other having teacher, becoming teacher, based on some qualities from their side, some biases from this side, and together makes them the teacher. Likewise with many things. So they say that. Now the Prasangika Madhyamika says this, that all of you are wrong. Vaibhashika, Sautantrika, no question. Totally wrong saying that things have intrinsic existence. No. Chitramatra, you're going to an extreme in both the cases. Completely denying external existence, external phenomena, saying nothing there is outside of the mind. That's one extreme. And then saying the mind has a true existence of its own. That's another extreme. Then for the Sautantrika Madhyamika, the Prasangika Madhyamika says, yes, you're getting there, not quite there. You're getting there, not quite there. Just the fact that you're just still holding on to some kind of intrinsicality. There you need to work on. You brought the mind, you helped the Chittamatras bringing the mind to the center. That's quite good. But at the same time, you still keep some objectivity to the mind, as well as to all the rest of the things. And that needs to be let go of. If you fear that letting that go then you lose all of the phenomena, that's an unfounded fear, I can tell you. Prasangika Madhyamika say that. But it's difficult. They cannot talk them into it easily. Yeah, so the Prasangika Madhyamikas come to a point of saying, objectivity-wise, not a single iota exists of objectivity. Yet at the same time, within that absence of objectivity, all the functionalities can be perfectly situated. It's not that everything will be hodgepodge, or that everything will be just however you project. No, everything is merely projected with no intrinsic existence. Yet within that projection, there is some order of operationality, functionality. So kind of leaving not the slightest iota of any objectivity, yet at the same time not completely falling into the extreme of denying the existence of the thing altogether, and thus being able to perfectly situate the fact of their functionality, operationality, their uniqueness, yeah, within this realm of their being thoroughly dependent with not the slightest iota of any intrinsic existence. And why make a big fuss of all of this? Because ultimately, afflictions still come. So long as there is some projection of objectivity, afflictions will come. They will never be eliminated. So it's all connected with our prospect of joy and happiness, because all rooted in the afflictions, they in turn are into the ignorance. And that ignorance at the very subtlest level is the ignorance which holds on to any amount of, as little as it may be, any amount of objectivity. So long as that grasping is there, so long as there is grasping, it is not view, right? There is no full understanding of the ultimate reality. And what would be the cost of that? One would still be subjected to afflictions. Afflictions, however much undermined they may be, they can never be uprooted so long as there is this grasping at inherent existence, however subtle it may be. But nonetheless, if it is there, even if a very subtle amount of it, that's enough. So that's the reason why the whole discussion is about. Okay, so in that respect, understanding conventional and ultimate reality is very important. And last time we talked about conventional and ultimate reality. Here, this is being taught from the Prasangika Madhyamika point of view, and all the objections to it will be the positions from the lower tenets that it will tackle. So from the Prasangika Madhyamika point of view, one way of understanding or situating the conventional and ultimate reality would be to take two model consciousness, to test them. Two model consciousness. One, on the one hand, although there can be so many consciousnesses, we are talking of only two model consciousness. One is grasping at inherent existence. The other is the wisdom understanding emptiness directly. So based on this, they make the case, they make the presentation of two truths that encompasses all the phenomena. Anything that only appears, now let's see, anything that only appears to a grasping at inherent existence, anything that is existing but is capable of appearing only in the face of grasping at inherent existence, is conventional truth, is a deceptive truth, because it is truth only in the eyes of a deceptive mind. The grasping at inherent existence is a deceptive mind, not just deceptive, thoroughly deceptive, completely saturated in the deception mind. So a truth that is capable of appearing only in the face of grasping at inherent existence is conventional truth, or is rather deceptive truth. All the rest, now nothing else is left except for emptiness. From the point of the Prasangika Madhyamika, we could say emptiness and or cessation. Only that remains. And those two, or that thing, that one thing, emptiness, is one thing that can appear to a grasping at inherent existence. Take the case of a grasping mind that grasps at emptiness as being truly existent. But I said earlier, things that appear only to, of these two models of consciousness, things that appear only to the grasping of inherent existence is deceptive truth. But this emptiness does appear there, but doesn't only appear to it. It also appears to the wisdom understanding emptiness in that direct way. So all that is left from that big bunch of deceptive truth is just emptiness and or cessation from the Prasangika Madhyamika point of view. Only those two things are left, or that one thing is left from the from the whole of phenomena. And that is ultimate truth, because it is the one that is able to show itself, show its face, show itself up in the face of an ultimate wisdom. Right? So this definition is in that line, in the second stanza. Ultimate is not the object of mind. The mind is, we could even say the mind is spoken of as the conventional truth, or we could say the mind is conventional truth. So the reason why I opted to take away these insertions in the original translation is because the way it is written in the original text and translated into Tibetan was the ground for so many misunderstandings, even to the point of saying ultimate nature is not an object of mind. Everything that is seen by mind is conventional truth, and that ultimate truth even doesn't exist because it is not the object of any mind. But if you insert these direct, dualistic, all of this, as if you find in your original translation, then it takes away all of those misinterpretations that are part and parcel of the existing commentaries, which comment on how people have mistaken these into this and this, and have even gone to the length of rejecting them. So the ultimate is not the object of mind, which means ultimate is not the object just of the deceptive mind. The deceptive mind is spoken of as the conventional truth, that which is the object of this deceptive mind, that which is the only object of deceptive mind is the conventional truth. So I think, things will not be that clear right away. If they are not, if they are clear, good. I'm reminded of our Posada precepts. If they are clear, good. If not, still work on them 2, 3 times, even 4, 5, 6 times. Okay, that's where we left last time. Now, third and fourth. Here it says, in light of that. What does it suggest? If you say, in light of that, in light of what? In light of the two truths? I think we can even do without that also. In the Tibetan, it's tela. Tela is just a filler. It just takes a space. It doesn't mean anything. Tela, jikten. The Tibetan term jikten, for which it is translated as world, it is, although when we say world of people means just the people, right? Or does it mean just the people or something else in English? The world of people. Is it just the people or something else more than the people? Anyway, the reason why I'm asking this is the Tibetan term jikten, which is translated as world here, in the way Gyaltsab has commented, it means nothing but the people. So it's saying beings are seen to be of two types. Beings are of two types: yogis and non-yogis. So in light of that, unless it doesn't do much, then it could be kept there. Otherwise, if it is connected to one thing or the other, going above, then it is better off taken away because it's not in the Tibetan. And also here, what we are making sense of is the beings could be generally divided into two: yogis and non-yogis. Although the Tibetan term is Phelpa, which is ordinary. Yogis and ordinary. Yogis and common people. So why this is being spoken of here is saying that understanding or developing this wisdom, for developing this wisdom, understanding the true truths is very essential. But when it comes to true truths, beings can be divided into two categories in regard to where they are on this. So beings kind of form into two categories: yogis and non-yogis, yogis and ordinaries. Now here, Gyaltsabje, I'm drawing mainly from Gyaltsabje's commentary and also from the commentary by this, I think, 17th, 18th century master called Thupten Chöra, which is a commentary that His Holiness recommends a lot. And I see some differences between the two. Some are very helpful. So let me first put it simply, in the simpler way. The beings are of two types, yogis and non-yogis. Now, since we are dealing with the two truths, yogis, the notion of yogis and the non-yogis have to kind of bear on that. So, doing so, what yogis stand for? Explicitly, yogis here stand for someone who has a direct perception of emptiness, who has the wisdom of equipoise, supported by the facilities of shamatha and vipassana. So a person who has this immersive wisdom into emptiness with the facilities of shamatha and vipassana supporting it. So basically, someone in the equipoise is the yogi. And from then above, you could call. Once you have gained it, then it is not lost. So say from the path of seeing onward. And the common people are? Yeah, but here the common people are not quiet. And then, okay, let me say that. So since the yogi explicitly means the Arya, who has this immersive wisdom into emptiness, in associated with that are those who may have not yet attained there, but have developed the wisdom of hearing into emptiness, wisdom of reflection into the emptiness, wisdom at the level of the path of preparation into emptiness. Those would be associated with yogis. The explicit member will be Aryas. Associated with them will be those who are on the path of becoming Aryas, who have developed that wisdom, who has that wisdom either at the hearing level or at the reflection level, contemplation level, but nonetheless still conceptual, not non-conceptual. And then in the common people or the ordinary people here are those who completely has a, what do you call, twisted understanding of how things exist. So here, simply put, we could say the Buddhist realists, not just Buddhists. They do not have to be Buddhists even. Those who grasp at inherent existence, those are not just confined to Buddhists. So even animals have that. But here, mainly those who are informed by tenets and has this deliberate position, deliberate opinion about how things exist. And they, through their deliberation, through their philosophizing, they advocate that things have intrinsic existence. So those are all philosophically informed, Tenet informed. But then those are the main members of this category. But associated with this are those who are less informed, less sophisticated, even including very common people who have no concern whatsoever about thinking any further than their day-to-day life or just this life. So uninformed by philosophies could also be included here. So that includes everyone in terms of the beings. In the translations, usually people call these so-called common people, at least the most prominent ones here, as realists. But realist is just a borrowed term from Western philosophy. It has to be really taken with a pinch of salt. Yes, because it is such a elastic term. It could be stretched to cover this and this and this. But basically what this is those philosophically informed ones who, out of their philosophy, thinking, meaning, they say that things ought to have independent existence of their own. Things ought to have independent existence. Things ought to have objective reality of its own. And then to be more specific, within the Buddhist context, it would be true to those who uphold true existence. Again, the term true existence is quite misleading. It's almost suggesting that things do not exist or they exist only falsely. If they exist falsely, that means they do not exist. It's quite misleading. Yeah. But those who are informed with this philosophy, we make this distinction between true existence, ultimate existence, yang tak berubah, yang tak berubah. Yeah, perfect existence. Yeah, perfect existence. Yeah, those could be put together. And then the rest three, intrinsic existence, inherent existence, existing on its own, rangsing ketubah, natural existence, rangun ketubah, objective existence, inherent existence, rangsing ngoyi ketubah, inherent existence. Those could be put in another category, and there's a difference made between the two. So I brought it up. I'll again bring it up again. So, but for now, the so-called six. Usually it comes in six. The so-called 6 ways of existing, which in the eyes of Prasangika Madhyamika they all mean the same thing, but in the eyes of others, including the Sautantrika Madhyamika, those 6 have to be divided up into 2 groups, and one can deny one but accept the other. So on that basis, the so-called realists or the so-called common people, at least the prominent ones, are those who advocate true existence, which is a form of objective existence, but not quite subtle objective existence. Anyway, for now, it's good to see. For now, it's good to think of the yogis as those who have gotten emptiness right, not just right, but who has understood it even directly. Associated with those are those who are buying into that position and have even developed wisdom, but not quite to the level of non-conceptual understanding. And in the fold of the common people, all that advocates philosophically informed beings who, through their thinking, philosophizing, and deliberate contemplation, come to the position that yes, things cannot but have true existence. And then associated with them are those who may not have even a position on this, or who have not even given thought on this. They all come into the common people. So that's laying the stage for this discussion. But as I said, many of the translations, even including here, I think they use the term realists, but that's only a temporary kind of label to hold on to, but not so thoroughly. Let's push the last two lines also. And it says, regarding that, again, in the Tibetan, it says tela, but His Holiness recommends to say it, to write it, to understand it as tele. Tele. It's tele. Tele means having made this division of beings into these two categories, out of them, from them, from them, what happens? The world of common people is undermined by the world of the yogis. And what about the yogis? Through their differences in their intelligence, the yogis too are undermined by progressively higher ones. So again, the views of that could be taken away, because we are already dealing with beings, common people and the yogis. So as per His Holiness's recommendation, part of the sources that I'm coming up with is listening to His Holiness's teaching. There he even takes liberty in suggesting certain improvement in the translation. Some tweaks here and there, but makes big difference. Which one? No. Lasale, yeah. In the Tibetan it says tela. All you do is just add sa after le, tele, which means from that or out of that. Out of that, the common people are undermined by the world of the yogis, or beings of the, or you could say the world of the yogis or the yogis. And what about the yogis? Even they are not spared. Even they are not spared of this. Among them, through their differences in intelligence, yogis too are undermined by progressively higher ones. So what it is saying is, when it comes to the two truths, there's a big difference between how the yogis understand and the common people understand. Within the common people also, you will find a whole range of where they lie, though within that canopy, within that fold of upholding true existence, nonetheless they differ in their slight in their slight what you call sophistication, slight differences. And then among the yogis also. Among the yogis, when we speak of the main yogis here, those means the Arya beings. Not that they differ on their basic position, but they differ in terms of how much they have developed, how much they have advanced in developing that wisdom, together with the qualities that they acquired along the path, and thus they outshine each other among themselves. So, on the basis of how refined their understanding has become of the ultimate reality. So, this way of dividing yogis one hand and the others on the other hand is much easier, and that's from the Tenzin Chodrak's translation. Tenzin Chodrak's Geshe Tenzin Chodrak's. Did I say Tenzin Chodrak? Not Tenzin Chodrak, right? Yeah, Geshe Tenzin Chodrak's in commentary. In Gesabjes, he mixes it up. He says he makes yogis and common people relative. Even among the common people, you will have yogis, or even among the yogis, you would have common people. Something like that. It's little mixed. It's easier to understand this way. You kind of have yogis and common people defined. And within the yogis, you make a range of differences. Within the common people, you make a range of differences. Differences in terms of their take on the ultimate reality. So let's leave it there. And then I'll keep bringing up new things here and there, and then you have to be wary about it. I will not be bringing all at the same time. But Yes, please. Venerable Pendela.
Geshe, could you please share a specific example of how using logic and reasoning help us understand the selflessness of a person and selflessness of phenomena conceptually?
Yes.
Thanks.
Yes. Among the many reasonings, the reasoning of dependent origination is called the king of reasonings. So that helps in deconstructing our notion of a concrete, solidified identity. So when we project it to ourselves, who we are, we tend to see ourselves as concrete or something almost, I say something almost pointable, because this understanding can lead, even is supposed to eventually lead to such a such a level of understanding that we would have difficulty even pinpointing something as something, because things aren't objectively that pinpointable. So one way of understanding is things are dependently related. Dependently related, be that on the ground of being totally dependent on causes and conditions. Nothing is independent in that they are totally dependent on their causes and conditions. So dependence on the causes and conditions is thorough in the case of compounded phenomena, in that everything that something is at a given moment is totally due to a previous moment of collection of things. It's almost like things do not have any say on what they become. It's thoroughly dictated, if you will, dictated or uh, derived from things preceding it. So in that sense, also they do not have any intrinsic identity of their own. They are totally in Shantideva's text itself. It calls phenomena as tulva, as magical. What do you call magical? Pardon? Magical illusions, magical, but not illusion, magical emanations. Yeah, things are magical emanations. They didn't come of their own. They do not have anything that they could their own. Everything about them is from something else. And they are here from the, when we approach it from the causal point of view, there's something else, is something that has already preceded it. It's no more there, but they are all that is responsible for who you are, what you are. Totally so. So that way we can rule out we can poke through this projection of something having a projected independent kind of a solid identity. Another, and that is the way of dealing with this topic in a temporal sense. How all something is totally dependent on something dependent on things that have preceded it, things that are no more there at that time, but who are totally responsible for it. The other one is not going into the sequence, not going into the temporal sense, just looking at the thing here and now. If you look deeply, you do not find any concrete identity. It's all dependent on causes, dependent on parts. If you take the parts away, there is no solid thing to be found. So just there and here and there, it's totally, it's a, what do you call, illusion. It's a mistaken notion that things have kind of a identity in and of itself, not dependent on its cause, on its parts. Apart from the parts, there is no identity of its own. That's one way of deconstructing this notion of a solid objective reality. Now, further down, deeper than that, is to see how the dependency, even the dependency of things, even at their time of existence, without thinking of their past and future, at their very given time, their very existence, their very identity is projected by mind. So here the thing that they depend on shifts. Earlier we thought of causes and conditions that they depend on, and which is also true. And the other one is how in their very time they are thoroughly without anything left out, thoroughly dependent on their parts. Without the parts there would be no identity. That's one way of projecting, seeing through the mistaken notion of a concrete identity. Now the third one is a little difficult, and even fully understanding it is not that not considered to come forth after having understood emptiness. Nonetheless, there the dependency, the thing that it depends, is not only the causes and conditions preceding it, not only the parts that exist with it, but on which they are totally dependent, but also to a projecting mind. So it depends not only on the parts, not only on the causes and conditions, because when we speak of parts and causes and conditions, we are still relying on things, outside things. Now we are bringing that shift of dependency on a projecting mind. Without the mind, it wouldn't be there. Now that would be a little difficult to say. What? Without the mind, it would not be there? What does that mean? Does that mean in the way the Chitramatras understand? That things are just maturation of the latencies left from before? Or in what ways? Now, not that. It is not that way of dependency, because the Chitramatras position ultimately is ruled out. It's not even a factual thing in the eyes of the Prasangika. Many of the positions held by the lower tenets are factual, except they do not go far enough. But this one even fails to be factual. Yet at the same time, it has so much, to offer in our dealing with the afflictions. But so it is not that. Yet at the same time, it is dependent on the projecting mind. So what does that mean? One has to, this will not be that apparent. But what does it mean is things are dependently designated in dependence on its basis of designation, or in dependence on its parts. To some extent, we saw how the thing depended on the parts. But now we are kind of expanding it further and saying, how come without its findability among the parts, how it still functions as a thing, apart from the parts? And it's because of a projecting mind. So when we say projecting mind, what it should leave us with is things. When we say they are dependent on projecting minds, what it should leave us with, a shock, is to be able to see that things do not exist from their side. They exist only by virtue of being posited from here. So to that extent, we have to pursue this understanding. And that is not that easy to, it's just not too easy to even agree with first. Yes.
Just wanted to clarify which tenet system you were talking about when you said what I see as private and personal, like you can't see the pencil that I can see. Was that Chittamatra?
Yes, that's Chittamatra.
And why wouldn't it be the higher systems?
Oh, in higher system, It is not. In what ways would it be a higher system?
I think actually maybe for Tantrika it's a little easier because they're saying there's something intrinsic, some character of the thing, so we could all see that maybe and agree. But then when you talk about the Prasangika, then why do we all agree?
In the case of the Prasangika Madhyamika, the part about the personal and the private is not there. It's not that I project and you become what you become because I project, except you are a mere projection. But not, if you say which projection, whose projection, that's again looking into an intrinsic projector. Nor is it saying that you are because of my projection. No. But nonetheless, mere projection.
So then for the Chittamatra, for that something to be private and personal, it has to be intrinsically what it is from their perspective, or is it just the thing about the latencies that refers to?
No, something being private and personal is because of a intrinsically private and personal mind that is making it happen. Okay, I think we should stop here. I should learn better way of asking for questions before it hits 10:30. I'm learning there.